Hi guys, I am back today by myself. I haven't done a solo episode, I don't think, yet in 2024, which on the one hand has been kind of exciting because more and more guests are wanting to come on and are saying yes when I ask, or they're reaching out to me. So that's been pretty cool that I can bring you guys some of my favorite people in the field that I think are doing amazing things. But I do like doing the solo episodes, and actually, I think you guys do too, because if I look at the analytics, most of my solo episodes tend to perform the best. So thank you. That's really encouraging. And it really means a lot to know that people are listening. I record these alone in my office and I never know who's listening and who it resonates with. But my hope is that it speaks to your heart and that to some extent you can use these words that I'm sharing and it hopefully makes your life a little bit easier. So let's jump into it. I wanted to record this today because I want to talk a little bit more about the three things that are absolute musts regarding emotional regulation. So, this is a topic that above and beyond so many others parents reach out and ask me about. It also comes up the most in coaching, so there's a lot around it in one-on-one coaching. And so as a result, I think it's important that I try to do as much as I can to give as much content as I can. I know in some cases some people are not in positions to do coaching, and that's quite all right. My hope really when I started the Parenting Reframe was that I could at least create a space and some sense of community around some of these challenges that parents are experiencing, and just helping you by giving you some of my insights and maybe insights of others and resources that I find helpful so that you can kind of make your way through without feeling completely alone in the process or judged. So that was the hope. So hence the podcast, and hopefully you're getting a lot of good info out of it, or at least tools that you can use. You can always email me or message me on any of, like, Instagram is usually the one I answer the fastest, but you can also message me on TikTok too. And I'm usually pretty good about getting back to you. So let's jump right into it. Today, I want to talk about three things that you really have to consider regarding emotional regulation. So, first and foremost, emotional regulation is really simple. It really just means your child can't tolerate the emotional response that usually occurs. It 9 out of 10 times happens when a boundary is set, or they're not getting the thing that they want, or something isn't working out in the way that they hoped it would. That elicits some type of an emotional response. Sometimes this is elicited because they're frustrated. Sometimes it happens because they're sad. Sometimes it happens because they're disappointed. There are a lot of reasons why, but something happens. It elicits a big emotional response. And unlike you and I as adults, children are still developing the skill to self regulate. So the emotion hits and it grows, and it depends on your child's temperament. But in some cases, it can continue to be bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of the way that it's expressed, and they can't manage it. So it isn't that there's anything inherently wrong with your child. I want to kind of make that clear. I have so many parents come to me and they're like, we think something's wrong with them. Our friends' kids don't do this. Or I think something's wrong. They threw the biggest tantrum the other night. It lasted 45 minutes. That happens. That happens. So again, I'm not saying that every situation is very different, but I don't want you to just assume because your child's exhibiting or expressing big emotions that something is absolutely wrong. That's a little bit of our kind of societal programming and cultural response to big emotions. And if you were like me in our generation when we grew up, you really didn't express negative emotions. And I hate to even call them that, but you didn't express things like sadness or discomfort or cry too much or get angry. That was usually met with some type of firm response, like, stop crying, there's nothing to cry about, get over it. If you do that, if you keep crying, you'll be in trouble, right? There was an immediate kind of negative response to any kind of expression of an emotion that even looked remotely close to sadness, anger, frustration, anything like that. So we just really learned to quickly suppress and move on. I don't think that we really learned to process, metabolize, and learn or integrate what these emotions were trying to show us. So if you're looking to kind of do it in a new way, I'm going to help you out, and hopefully you can think of it a little bit differently and not get completely stressed at the kind of onset of a tantrum. So basically, that's what emotional dysregulation looks like. It's a really big emotional response. It's also usually pretty disproportionate to the event, whatever elicited it. Meaning, I've seen some kids cry and cry and cry for like 35, 40 minutes because the song that they wanted to listen to wasn't available to, or the parent had to say no to a certain type of food, or it wasn't their turn doing something. Like, it's usually something small, or it seems small in the eyes of the adult, and then it usually produces a pretty big response. Apologies in advance for my dog. He is not leaving my side, and for whatever reason, he is protecting me at the top of the stairs, watching as the neighbors walk by with their dogs. So anyways, jumping into it, the first thing you have to know about emotional regulation is this: your ability to regulate your emotions is going to be key. So that's number one. How regulated are you while your child is dysregulated? Because we all know that co-regulation is one of the best ways to help our children calm down. So I'm going to run through some examples. If your child has a really big explosive response, is your knee-jerk reaction to immediately try to shut it down? Meaning you say stuff like, "That's enough, quit it, stop that screaming." Or is your knee-jerk reaction to kind of do away with it? Like, if you're going to cry like that, go in your room. I don't want to hear it. Is your knee-jerk reaction to do nothing, and you're almost like a deer in headlights where you just want it to stop, but you don't know what to do? So there is no comforting, there is no talking, there is nothing. You're just frozen. So there are a lot of different ways that we respond when our kids exhibit big, big, big emotions. Another one that frequently comes up is we like will them to stop, right? So we're saying things like, "Honey, it's okay, you're fine. Why are you sad? Tell me why you're sad." And we pepper them with a lot of questions. All of the above that I just described is not going to allow for co-regulation. Even if you're calm when you're asking those things, co-regulation is this: your child starts to exhibit really big emotions, you stop, you look to see what is that trigger inside of you. Remember, I teach my 4-step process called PAR. So the first thing you're doing, P stands for pause. You're pausing. You're not doing anything in that first second. And then you're just acknowledging. And it can be as simple as like, "Oh my gosh, every time they have a tantrum, I want to lose my mind." I acknowledge how triggered I am right now. I am seeing red because this is the 4th tantrum today. Whatever it is, just acknowledge what's coming up for you. And then you're going to respond. And the response is going to be different depending on your child's age, your child's needs, what the response or what the actual situation is. But by doing those first 2 steps, what you are doing in that moment is you are staying grounded and calm. So I would much rather have a parent stay grounded, calm, and silent rather than explosive, yelling, and reactive. Meaning, if you have only 2 modes that you can operate in, choose the one where you're not doing anything. It will be better than the explosive response, simply because usually it escalates the emotional dysregulation even more. Very rarely are we in situations where we can explode and yell at our kids and they immediately stop. In the event that it works, because sometimes it does, it's just telling us that your child likely has a mindset where they value approval. So when you're yelling, when you're showing disappointment, when you're expressing your own sort of unhappiness around their choice, they don't like that because they value your approval. So they immediately start to suppress what they're feeling, or they try to stop what they're feeling. So again, it's not, and I've said this before, there's not really anything wrong with a child who seeks approval. You're going to have to continue to monitor that as they get older, because certainly once they're outside of that home setting, we want to really know, who are they seeking approval from. We want to eventually give our kids the ability to sort of feel motivated through intrinsic means rather than externally feeling motivated all the time. But for a child who's strong-willed, who's what I would describe as emotionally dysregulated often, they likely don't care about your approval. And that's not great news. I know you're like, but why don't they? But they just don't. So if you're going to go about it with the mindset that like, I can yell this away, I can punish it away, I can time out it away, it doesn't usually work. So I want you to first know that you have to really think about co-regulation, staying calm yourself. If you only know, if your knee-jerk reaction is to yell, is to talk a lot, is to do any of those things, honestly, go the route of doing nothing and keep working on yourself. So that's what I want you to know. There's obviously a lot more to do, but I just could never get into it in a short podcast episode. But just start there. Just start there if you're fully in the throes of it. The second thing I want you to know is self-regulation is a skill. It is not something that kids inherently have. So as adults, yes, we're able to regulate our emotions, but children can't. Now, this looks different from child to child based on a lot of different things. Like I mentioned, temperament earlier. Some kids with maturation, it gets better, right? It's very different, and it depends on age. It depends on a lot of things. Sometimes we have different factors if you have a neurodivergent child, or if you have a child who has maybe endured trauma, or there is something along those lines. Certainly context matters, right? So I don't want to completely generalize and say all. But self-regulation has to be taught, has to be learned. So number one, that co-regulation piece is going to be huge, because your child starts to see that when they are erupting, more or less, what's happening is you're not rattled. You're strong. You're grounded. You're right there with them. You're not moving away. You're not yelling. You're not escalating with them. You're unfazed. You're unfazed, and in that ability to stay really neutral, grounded, and calm, you start to help them do the same thing. They start to realize there's a different way to go through this. They also start to process things internally rather than looking to you to decide how they want to calm themselves down. Again, it's a learned skill. So what does this look like? I've used this example before, but when I was teaching, I had a class of 4-year-olds, and I had this one little guy who had real big emotions, really, really, really happy, you knew it. And when he was sad, you knew it. And when he was mad, you knew it, right? And he was adorable. He was one of my absolute favorites just because of how fun his personality was. But on the days when he was upset, he was really upset, and he was upset for a while. And long story short, what I decided over time was that I couldn't keep kind of trying to get his tantrum to stop, which is essentially what I was doing by offering other things, redirecting. We love redirecting, right? Well, as a result, the minute he didn't get his way again, we still wound up in square one. So the redirection was really a Band-Aid on a much bigger issue, which is that we needed to give him the tools to self-regulate when he felt those emotions. We needed to trust that he could work through all of that disruption, all of that emotional dysregulation, and realize he's okay and gain the tools and the ability to regulate himself, right? Instead of me jumping in to save the day, I needed to actually back away and not do very much other than allow him to know I'm there for him and I see him. So over time, I ended up letting him cry, get really upset, exhibit frustration. He was upset. He was saying mean things, right? The whole thing. And I said to him, I know, honey, I know it's so frustrating to not get what we want. When you're ready, I'm over here if you want to do A, B, or C. I didn't do more than that. I didn't talk more than that. I didn't constantly go up to him. I was there. I was within his view. I kept an eye on him. I was calm. I was grounded. The first day, the tantrum lasted very, very long, and then it eventually subsided. And within a second, he made a new choice. He decided what he wanted to do, and he was happy-go-lucky the rest of the class. Day 2, he cried for 15 minutes when he didn't get the thing that he wanted. And then by day 3, he just goes, oh man. And then he moved on and did something else. Boom. In 3 days, we went from a 45-minute tantrum to 3 days later, him basically being able to learn how to self-regulate in the context of the classroom when he didn't get the thing that he wanted. So again, it's not going to look like that in everybody's home or in anybody's, setting if you're a caretaker, if you're a teacher, but I'm just using that point to illustrate that it didn't take a lot from me other than to recognize my own trigger and my own desire to want to make sure he was okay. And being okay to me means not crying, being happy. Well, there's a lot we have to unpack there, because that's a tall order if we're expecting our kids to always be happy. That is not fair. That is not realistic. And when we value our ability to care for a child based on the happiness they exhibit, we are burdening them. Can you imagine if someone said to you, you must always present as happy? Can you imagine if every time you felt annoyed or frustrated or angered by something, you had to immediately stop feeling that way and move right into happiness and never process those really important critical lessons? It's not fair. We cannot expect our kids to be happy all the time, and we cannot tether our value as a parent to the degree of happiness they are showing us. It is an unfair algorithm. Stop using it. It's really ineffective, especially if your hope is to raise a child who is emotionally secure, who is resilient, who can process and sit with discomfort so they can learn and gain the tools that they need to gain and then continue to grow and expand and evolve. We are all capable of this, but it starts with us. We have to show our kids how we do it. We have to remain calm in the face of discomfort. And then we have to show our kids that we trust that they can make it through this and that they can gain the tools that they need. So keep that in mind. Self-regulation is learned. And if you have a child who really struggles, you're really going to want to think about how and where are you leaving those opportunities available to them to just learn it on their own. It takes time, but it's so necessary, because if you bypass it all the time, it really doesn't get better. And I've said this before to families that I coach. When you allow a child to be emotionally dysregulated, and maybe allow isn't the right word, but when you constantly try to stop it, fix it, change it, punish it, whatever it looks like, that you can't all of a sudden tolerate what that emotion looks like. And so now you're jumping in with all these solutions to fix it. And now your child is older, and by older I mean 7, 8, 9, maybe even 6. Well, now you have an incredibly sophisticated child, because their language skills have expanded, their ability to think abstractly has grown, and now we start to couple things with more manipulation. Those tantrums get different, right? I've worked with parents of 9-year-olds, and they're saying really provocative things. They're able to just say things to completely get under their parents' skin, because they want to see, what are you going to do? So that dysregulation can get worse. I mean, certainly can get better with time, but to completely put our eggs in that basket isn't always a useful way of looking at it. The last thing I want you to know is you need a plan. So just to review, number 1, what does your regulation look like around their big emotions? Are you able to stay calm and help them co-regulate? Number 2, self-regulation is a skill. They need to learn it. And number 3, you need a plan. And this is why I say this. 9 out of 10 times when I'm working with a family, what I find is we usually, when our kids exhibit emotional dysregulation, we kind of throw everything at it and we hope something sticks. It's like throwing spaghetti on the wall and watching what sticks. And so what happens is every time they respond, they have a big outburst, let's call it that, we have a different way of responding. So the first time we might offer choices. The second time we might get really upset and tell them they have to go to their room. The third time we might ignore them. And then the fourth time, we might just blow up and match their energy and escalate with them until something finally gives. In each one of those instances, our kids are looking at us as unpredictable. We are not coming back with the same consistent response to help them calm down. So when things are unpredictable, especially if you have a strong-willed child, especially if you have a child who is emotionally dysregulated, that scares them. And 9 out of 10 times, the emotional dysregulation increases, because for them, there is no safety net anymore. They don't know what to do. They're having these big emotions. This is my own theory, but I think most kids in the midst of emotional dysregulation feel afraid and they feel out of control. Like they realize there is no way they can stop themselves. They don't know what's going on. So if now their safe caretaker is also resembling them and escalating in energy, it appears that when I feel this way, when I have to express these emotions, nothing is safe around me. My leaders fall apart. The people that are caring for me seem to be in the same boat as I am. There's nowhere for me to anchor. There's nowhere for me to ground. So we have to be really cognizant of the fact that we need a plan so that we are consistent and we know what to do. So here is the twofold in the plan idea or the plan suggestion. When you have a plan, you usually won't overreact because your brain is already prepared with an action plan. So you see the tantrum starts to occur or the emotional dysregulation starts to occur, your mind goes immediately into, okay, next step is this. Instead of being reactive, you're now going to be responsive because you know what to expect and you're going to follow a series of plans. Even though they're still going to be upset, they're still going to cry, you knowing what to say, what to do, how to hold space for them in that moment and how to get them through to the other side is going to be huge in going back to step 1 of keeping you calm so you can then co-regulate with your child. So having a plan is critical. I wish I could give you a ton of plans on this podcast episode, but that's really where the coaching piece is so helpful. If you watch a lot of my TikTok videos or videos that I've posted on Substack, I offer a lot of different suggestions around this. So just a quick example would be, if you know that your child, every time they are faced with frustration, that ability to tolerate frustration is really low. So then that what ends up happening is they get frustrated and then that grows into a big tantrum or that results in a tantrum. We know we need to figure out how to increase their ability to tolerate frustration. right? The other thing we need to know is when the tantrum happens, what we really want to do in that moment, and this is what I just call my kind of connection sandwich, which is that you're going to state your boundary, express empathy, and restate your boundary. So I've used this example before, but let's say they want a cookie before dinner. You don't want to give them a cookie before dinner. So you say you can't have a cookie before dinner because we have to finish our meal first. They start to cry. So you've already stated the boundary. Instead of going into a corrective action plan, which is usually like we get annoyed that they're crying, and especially if it's a situation where they've asked us every single night for the cookie before dinner and this is like a repeat event, it's very natural for a parent in that moment to kind of roll their eyes and go like, I'm not doing this. We talked about this last night and the night before. Get over it. You know you're not getting, like, we can get kind of really wrapped up in the fatigue of it, which is, by the way, so understandable. Instead, you just want to go right into like, how are they feeling? How can I connect? So the feeling is, I don't get to have the thing I want. I think every single person on this planet understands what that feeling feels like. It doesn't have to be in the same context as what your child's experiencing in that moment, but we all know that feeling, the disappointment that accompanies not getting what we want. So in that moment, we connect with that parallel feeling and we just say, gosh, I'm so sorry. I know it's hard not to get the thing that you want, but we can't have a cookie before dinner. And then we restate that boundary. So always start there. And it can look different in everyone's home and it can look different, and context really matters. There's a lot that goes into it. But for me, I always think if you can just have that little formula in mind, that's going to at least help you to at least have something to say and do instead of becoming reactive in that moment and then usually causing that tantrum to either escalate, you escalate, everybody's pretty fatigued and exhausted by the end, and we're just not even quite sure what to do. So that is my little 3-step system. Those are the 3 things that are an absolute must if you're dealing with emotional dysregulation. I hope it helps. I will include in the show notes something that I'm offering. I'm going to be doing a group coaching program. So if any of this resonates with you, starting in mid-April, I'm going to do group coaching. I only take on 10 people in the group coaching program, but it's going to be centered around emotional dysregulation. This time, as opposed to last time when I did Raising Strong-Willed Kids, this one's going to actually be 5 weeks long with 5 calls, and you do have complete Voxer access to me. Voxer is an app where you can text and voice message me so that I can support you in real time. That's why I cap the group at 10, so that I'm really available and there for you so that I can help you. We all know that to make meaningful change, it just takes time. That's one of the reasons I stopped doing one-on-one sessions for only a one-time call, because it wasn't enough to really help you and support you. And I just felt like I was not doing a service to you if I was just talking to you once. So through a group coaching program, I have the benefit of time. You can also reach out to me through those 5 weeks and we can go back and forth through Messenger, plus our weekly calls where we're live. I teach on one topic each week. The final call will be all Q&A so that I can support you and answer all your questions. And usually your question is somebody else's question in the group. We also leave time for Q&A on each of the weekly calls. So if that interests you, if you find that this really resonates with you, if you are in the throes of emotional dysregulation, I promise you, 1, you're not alone, and 2, there are so many ways we can help. So don't hesitate. Go to the show notes, look at that link, and reach out with any questions. I'd love to be able to serve in a way and really make sure that I can be there for you. So until next time, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Goodbye.